But he did accept the Premier's appointment to the highest position with the W.C.B. Chairman of the Workers' Compensation.
Good evening. It's question period on Webster tonight. Questions to the Speaker of the House of Commons, I better mind my language, and questions from thee and me to the Chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board, where you don't have to be so particular. But first, here's Ted with the rundown.
He said he'd never serve in a cabinet led by Van der Zalm, and he kept that promise. But he did accept the Premier's appointment to the highest position with the W.C.B. Jim Nielsen, Chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board, is coming up with Webster. As Fisheries Minister, John Fraser's resignation was one of the first of 7 to plague the Tories. Now he's back on top, receiving accolades from all federal politicians for his job in the House. In the studio with Webster, the first speaker elected by the members of the House of Commons, MP for Vancouver South, John Fraser.
Said Webster, rising to his feet and catching the attention of the Speaker. By the way, do I have to arrange to catch your attention, or is it the luck of the draw when I get up?
It helps to arrange it ahead of time, Jack. And it helps some members a lot more than it would be necessary to help others.
Mr. Speaker, is it not a fact that as you sit in question period day after day after day, hearing this disgusting language and these allegations and insinuations from the gutter and the rats among the garbage and the sleazy allegations, that you're not inclined to shut the whole place down for 5 minutes?
Sometimes that would help, but sometimes I just get up and I talk for 3 or 4 minutes and it calms things down. And there's a slow impulse of self-discipline and dignity returns. It's there, you know, if you give it a chance to work itself back into...
Mr. Speaker, may I call you John tonight?
Oh, yes, you may. Yes.
John Fraser, MP for Vancouver South for these many years, 15 years, right?
Well, in the 15th year, Jack.
First of all, you were the Minister in Clark's government for how many portfolios?
Environment and Post Office. But I had them both at the same time.
And then in the Mulroney government?
Fisheries.
You had fisheries. And then you came like a phoenix from the ashes to become Speaker. Were you urged, or had you decided in this first election of a Speaker to go for the brass ring?
No, I said no. I came back from a trip on horseback in the Chilcote and got on a plane, went to Ottawa, and got my name taken off the list. And then I did what I thought would close the door on it completely. I phoned Arch McKenzie of the Star Canadian Press, and I said, Arch, I'm returning your phone call, and you can tell all your colleagues I'm not going to put my name forward. And he said, well, he was sorry to hear that, which was a nice thing for him to say. But I said, that's it. And I got on a plane to come back out here to go grouse hunting, and I got off the plane, and that's when it all started all over again, and I realized that I guess a lot of people must have been able to see something I couldn't see. So after 48 hours of difficult thinking, I changed my mind.
How long did you change your mind?
And I'm not sorry now I changed my mind, but it wasn't easy.
No, in the first few days, the Speaker must have been very tough indeed. Mind you, you've been in the House for 15 years. You know the patter.
Well, I think that having been there for a long time, you absorb a lot of what it ought to be, and you don't know all the rules in exact detail, but you know basically what it is. But you also know the people, and I've been lucky in public life. I've made friends in all the parties, and you know the older ones. You know the ones that are really the parliamentary leaders now, and if you know them well, and you can get their support, it makes the job a lot easier.
Yeah, but how about the ministers on the front bench, your former colleagues? Did they respond to the discipline of the Speaker when you get up as quickly as the others?
The ones who are veterans know that they, along with me, tried every trick in the book. So when I have to admonish them, they're not surprised. Mm-hmm. They know it's coming.
But quite seriously, what most of us see of the House of Commons are extracts from question period. And when you see the Prime Minister or whoever, whether it's the Rat Pack or the Prime Minister or anybody else, shouting sleazy or gutter rats in the garbage, at what stage do you decide to stop in and clean up their act?
Well, I try to head it off before it gets too far. But the Speaker can't rise and close off a question or a reply until you've heard something. But what I do is I move in before the words get absolutely unparliamentary. If the question is so belligerent and is so antagonistic and is using demeaning language, I'll get up and stop it. And I'll ask the member to rephrase it. And for this reason, the member may not have used anything that's unparliamentary, strictly speaking, like calling someone a liar or a thief or a crook. But that demeaning language evokes the same kind of retort from the minister, and then you've got disorder. If you've got disorder, you haven't got free speech, and that's what I'm supposed to protect.
I watched you jump in the other day and stop the use of a word which, well, you decided, I think, that it's not parliamentary. Sleazy.
Well, what I did there is I reminded everybody, tried to put a little humor in it, that sleaze, strictly defined, is an old English word for inferior cloth garments. But today it has a connotation very different from that. And so what I did is try to remind everybody that if you use those kind of words, you're going to cause an uproar and you're going to make life difficult for yourself.
The classic one, of course, would you allow terminological inexactitude? It's guilty of a terminological, the Honourable the Prime Minister is guilty and he knows it, of a terminological inexactitude.
Well, we know what it means. It means to distort the truth, to be less than accurate in putting a position. But it evokes such humor that I would be reluctant to make a big issue of it.
Because freedom of speech is the name of the game.
Freedom of speech is everything in that place. But as I said, you can only have freedom of speech if you have reasonable order. And if you go to excess, you're going to invite a response and you won't have any order at all.
Do we have the right kind of question period where a questioner gets up and asks a principal question and two supplementaries? In Britain, they have a slightly different system, don't they?
Well, in our system, it's only the lead. The leader of the opposition, leader of the New Democratic Party get one principal question, two supplementals. After that, everybody's one principal question, one supplemental. In Great Britain, what they do is that you write in, and your first question is put in writing. The minister isn't there every day. The minister comes on, say, Thursday afternoon to deal with questions that are directed at that minister. So the minister answers the written first question, but then the member has a right to supplementals, and that's where the action really is.
Yeah, I've seen Thatcher get up and say, number 14, or the speaker or somebody says number 14, she gives an answer, and then there's one supplementary.
That's right.
But some of our MPs are not very good at asking questions, are they? They make speeches, they don't ask questions.
Well, some of them tend to make not only speeches, but they make allegations. And then they get annoyed because the minister never gets around to answering the question that they finally put. The minister's taking on the allegation or the premises of the speech, and that causes a lot of delay. But on the other hand, some ministers wander on. I mean, some ministers seem to have great difficulty in making up their mind what kind of an answer they really want to give, and then I have to cut them off because they're using up time.
You mustn't show favour either.
You can't show any favor. You got to show a lot of common sense, but you can't show any favor.
The impression we get from here, of course, is that question period, with all its slanging matches, kind of paralyzes the very institution of Parliament. True or false?
No, it doesn't, because it's only 45 minutes of the day. At its best, it's an accountability session. At its worst, it gets to be a harangue.
But a minister doesn't have to answer a question. He
Minister
merely has to open his mouth a few
Minister
times.
is not required to answer a question, and if the same question is answered over and over again, I get up and I point out that the minister does not have to answer a question that's asked again and again and again. But skillful questioners will, when they're probing, will try to put the same question in different ways and get a response. But after the 45-minute question period, we go back to debate, and remember that as soon as they're out of question period, most of these members are in committee doing things. There's a lot of work going on.
Is there cooperation on all sides of the House for special occasions, or is what we see as ill-feeling spreading into the parliamentary business?
No, the government has, certainly since I became Speaker, the government agenda has moved very rapidly and very effectively. Even when the New Democratic Party was putting up a very skillful procedural filibuster against the drug bill, they still broke off to cooperate with the government on matters of importance, for instance, like the Bank of British Columbia legislation. And there is good consultation going on between the parties, which there has to be, but it's there. And while there are certainly vigorous debates going on, vigorous differences of opinion, the attitude and the general comportment is pretty good.
John Fraser, PC, what's all your titles now? PCQC MP.
That's right.
John Fraser, PCQC MP, Speaker of the House of Commons. I have a couple more questions. We'll take some calls too after the break. As Speaker of the House of Commons, Mr. Fraser, you still, of course, are responsible for your constituency affairs.
I am, and it goes beyond the constituency because I've been active in a lot of things over many years: conservation, environment, fisheries, forestry, civil rights. Those people haven't gone away. They still come to me and ask me to try to get something done.
But what about this seemingly ludicrous business of wiping out Vancouver Kingsway, reducing Vancouver by a whole seat? And your constituency has been enlarged. Is this not a bad move?
Well, I don't know that it's my place to say whether it's bad or whether it's good, but I can make a couple of observations if it's any help.
Please.
I think it would be very regrettable if Vancouver loses one of its 5 seats, one of its 5 representatives. And the other thing is that, I don't mind taking on more work, but that's a significant increase of representation. I think that I would then end up with the largest number of voters, the largest population in any riding in British Columbia.
107,000, roughly, more or less.
But my greatest concern is the loss of a seat
for
our city. Well, it's nothing to do with who holds it. It's everything to do with representation.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Fraser?
Yes.
I'd like to ask you a question. Do you believe Parliament would be better served if the question period and the sort of political grandstanding that you see on TV was eliminated from the TV news and simply reported as such?
You mean the live television coverage clips?
The live television coverage of the question period and the little clips that come from it.
Okay.
Well, I would prefer sometimes that the media, whoever it was, would use a little bit more exacting discretion on some of the clips. And one of the problems that was there before I became Speaker was that some members almost were rewarded by the use of clips of their own outrageous behavior. I'm trying to make sure that no one gets rewarded for that. But I do not think that it is possible to go to eliminating television. I think things could be done to make the television coverage of not just question period but of the debates more accurate.
But
the present system distorts the accuracy of what's going on.
Well, a natural performer is going to get the edge from an editor in any television station across the country. You don't want somebody who stumbles out a question and loses the point.
A natural performer is always going to get the ratings, but it's a question of what kind of a performance.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, please.
Yes, the Speaker. I'd like to say that I support a party that's the exact opposite of his, and I've spoke to quite a few MPs in my time from all parties, and the thing that most impressed me was the respect that they had for Mr. Fraser. And I've been watching him as Speaker of the House. I think he's doing a damn fine job, and I hope he keeps it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was a nice comment, but let me say this. I couldn't do this job without the support of friends in all the parties. This isn't I'm not a policeman. I can be a judge and a moderator and a conciliator, but I need their help, and I'm very grateful that it's there.
Go ahead, please.
I'd just like to thank Mr. Fraser for hanging in there, and I'd like to add to that I think he got the short end of the stick. But I have a question. And Mr. Fraser, I understand that you're in charge of Parliament Hill and the parliamentary restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand it's one of the most heavily subsidized restaurants in Canada. In fact, you can get a gourmet meal for next to nothing. When's that going to change?
Well, if this makes you feel any better, it changed some years ago. And the complaint from members now is that the quality has gone down, the prices are too high, it's not being frequented enough, and I am just in the midst of setting up a committee, a parliamentary restaurant committee to try to bring together the complaints that are coming from members. But in actual fact, all of the prices went up several years ago. It had nothing to do with me.
But they don't run on a non-subsidized basis, do they?
Not completely, but it's much closer to
The old
that.
$3 steaks and cheap wine are gone.
That's gone.
How many employees do you have in the Hill? Are you responsible for? Thousands.
About 16 to 1,700 Hill employees, but then I'm responsible for making sure that all the members and all their staffs are properly serviced, and I have to maintain some kind of administrative order out of the potential chaos.
Have you ever moved into the big fancy speaker's house?
No, we've used it occasionally, but it's really not ready to be moved into, and it has caused a lot of controversy.
Because you're still staying downtown.
Well, we've had a home in Ottawa for years, which is comfortable.
Go ahead, please. Hello, what are you?
Oh, yes. Mr. Fraser, I congratulate you on being a fine conciliator. Sometimes it's overdone, in my opinion, particularly last Wednesday when Bill Blakey from Winnipeg was speaking about the United States official statements on acid rain problem, which we seem to treat with kid gloves. And when he asked Joe Clark, the Secretary of State for External Affairs, to say that it was a lie that the Americans seem to think that our concern for acid rain is reduced to conspiracy to sell more hydropower to the states.
What's your
and
question?
you felt that there's certain things ought not to be said about representatives of a friendly country, and sometimes I wonder who's our friends when we are having our environment poisoned.
Well,
I thought you were a little...
Well, madam, I expected that Mr. Blakey, who I know very well, was going to say exactly that in retort, and of course he did. But it is my obligation as Speaker to remind any member or any minister that when they start to trespass against the rules, I have to draw that to their attention.
And the second thing, when you leave the chair, who takes your place and why?
Well, I've 3 deputy speakers.
Pardon?
I have 3 deputy speakers.
Oh, thanks very much.
Marcel Denny and 2 others.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jack. John, I'm concerned about the deficit. I'm one of your constituents that have supported you since 1972. Mr. Wilson has continuously raised our income taxes, but there's no change in the deficit. Could you answer that? And thirdly, for some time now, Mr. Dye has been trying to find out who or what was paid for Petro-Canada.
Petrofina.
Petrofina, you're right.
Yes, carry on.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're trying to find out. The people of Canada continuously have to take our elected representatives to court to find out what's going on. Why is this a problem?
Well, first of all, I've got to be very careful because the Speaker cannot sound as if the Speaker is defending the government or advancing the government any more than I can defend or advance the cause of the opposition. But I think I can say this. First of all, the deficit is lower today than it was projected to be if the actions taken hadn't been taken, and one can argue whether more should have been done or less. Both positions are vigorously argued. The second question on Petrofina comes down to a convention which exists in our parliamentary system whereby the cabinet deliberations of a former government are not released by an incoming government unless the former government prime minister and the members of the former government are prepared to release it. And that is the position that the incoming government has had to take, and that's why Dye has had to go to court to get it.
And hasn't yet been successful.
No.
Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Fraser. In the United States, they use Robert's Rules of Order in parliamentary procedure. In Canada, I believe we use Beauchesne's. Am I saying that right?
Well, we use Beauchesne and Erskine May, and we also use, of course, the orders and the rules which we have set up for ourselves, which are the orders of our chamber.
Yes, that was my question. How different are our rules of order in parliamentary procedure than that from Britain and the other Commonwealth nations?
The general approach in all of the Commonwealth nations where we have a parliament of the British tradition is pretty well the same. But it's a question of degree, I suppose.
I guess we'd be pretty unique. We're unique in the election of the Speaker?
No, in fact, the British have elected their Speaker for generations, although often the Speaker was re-elected or reacclaimed by acclamation. But they have always been able to have an election if they wanted. Maybe we could have, but we never really did.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser. You're in town, of course, to attend the dinner tribute to your non-partisan group, paying you great honor tomorrow night in Vancouver. Nice to talk to you, John.
Nice to be here, Jack, and
it's
always nice to be home.
I'll try my mind and remember not to call anybody a sleaze.
or some other things.
Yeah, some of the other unparliamentary expressions you taught me off the air this afternoon.
That's right. Well, we don't want disorder, Jack.
My thanks to John Fraser. Next, Jim Nielsen, chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board, after the break. The Workers' Compensation Board has always been under attack, but it seems to go through phases when some of the attacks are more biting and critical than others. And I think the new chairman of the Compensation Board, Jim Nielsen, former cabinet minister in the Bennett government, is under a heavier attack than at any time in the history of the board. If you look at what Friedman said about the Compensation Board for a start, and he was no fool, how much of a mess did you find when you went in?
Well, I wouldn't consider Carl Friedman to be an authority on much of anything, Jack.
Oh, in some cases he was very good.
Oh, in some cases perhaps, but not an authority on the overall Workers' Compensation Board. Workers' Compensation Board functions very well in BC. There are situations where the attention is brought before the public and one specific case may be examined very thoroughly, and it would appear that there have been situations where the person may have been dealt with unfairly.
Let's take that specific case. We'll talk about the Testa case, where a guy is injured twice, goes back to work the second time, goes to 2 boards of reviews. They support them all the way. And eventually the judge in the Supreme Court says the conduct of the Compensation Board was not the least bit reasonable, it was petulant, and they better give him the money to which he was entitled. Because after the review board said he's right, in come the members of the board and they wipe it out. And they're going to appeal it, right?
Well, the system, the boards of review, the Board of Review does not make decisions in these cases. It makes a finding, and then it goes back to the commissioners if necessary.
In that case, there were 2 boards of review which gave him favorable findings.
Well, quite possibly, yes.
And a judge of the Supreme Court said, petulant, unreasonable, unfair, unjust, give him the money, and you're still going to appeal that judge's decision.
Well, the judge's decision involved 3 specifics, and it's on one specific that the appeal is going to be heard. They'll probably appeal the entire judgment, but it's on one specific. The Supreme Court judge made a ruling in that case, and there is the opportunity to appeal that, and that will be appealed on a point of law. But that's to be heard. But that was one case, and there's a mixture of events with respect to that case. One is the individual's adjudication, and then a couple of points in law. The adjudication could go anyway, depending on who may hear it.
Well, if we're talking about that case, it came back to the commissioners, and the commissioners, I see from the judge's decision, didn't even bother to read the transcripts, but merely took the Compensation Board files and turned the whole thing down out of hand.
Well, this is going back a wee while now.
But is that not a classic case where the Workers' Compensation Board was held up to scorn by the courts and the public and the claimants?
And part of it is because of the system, Jack, and that's what we're investigating now, because the system permits a very strange system of appeals and reappeals and reopenings, and it goes on, can go on ad infinitum.
Years.
Yes, it can go on. We have cases before the Board of Review now that may have originally been settled in the 1940s, but for some reason they have been reopened, and then there is an appeal to that. Some of the appeals are very, very minor appeals, but they still count as an appeal, and sometimes still takes a couple of years.
You've got the case where a worker can wait 2 years for the appeal at the Board of Review level, and another 2-year wait for the commissioners to make up their minds.
Well, they shouldn't wait for 2 years for the commissioners to make up their minds, because very few of the cases that go through the review boards go back to the commissioners. Very, very few.
But the commissioners have overall power at any time when a case comes to them and say, no, we disallow the lot.
The Board of Review decision or finding can be referred back to the commissioners by a number of people. It can be referred back to the commissioners through the adjudication process, or by the employer or employee, depending on who is on the other side. And commissioners have the authority to reopen a case at any time.
I know. But I can prove to you that if you can get to the Board of Review with representation, you get an 80% chance of winning
No,
the Board of
no,
Review.
not
Yes?
correct, not correct.
Success rate for workers
no.
who appeal on their own is only 40%.
Oh, that could be, yes.
With the appeal with a lawyer or a union, it's 80%.
No,
so if you can fight your way through your bureaucracy, you have a better chance.
The actual number of cases which go before the Board of Review, which result in a modification of the adjudication is 44%. That's the overall. That's been the average for the last 12 years, 44%. Court of Appeal in BC is about 35%.
Just a minute. You're saying that go through the Board of Review, and then it's got to be okayed by the commissioner.
No, Jack. Only if it's referred to the commissioners for one of six specific reasons. It can be referred to the commissioners. A very minor number of cases go back to the commissioners. I think last year it was 46 were overturned.
Who refers it to the commissioners after the decision has been made?
The adjudicator may look at the case and say, through the general manager or through the manager of claims, may say that this is questionable under a point of law or contrary to policy or a number of other reasons. It can then be reviewed by the commissioners. Or the employer may feel that the decision was wrong and may appeal that to the commissioners. Or the commissioners on their own may reopen a case.
In other words, the fact that you've gone through the whole procedure and got to a Board of Review which says you're fine doesn't win your case at all.
Board of Review reaches a finding. They do not reach a decision. But the vast majority of those are upheld by the Workers' Compensation Board.
By the board itself.
Yes.
Very
few go back to the commissioners. Very few.
You'll agree, though, that the bureaucracy is almost overwhelming and quite untenable and leads to extravagant delays of years for dissatisfied claimants.
The statute, the regulations, and the policy and procedures that make up the Workers' Compensation Board system is very bureaucratic, it is very cumbersome, and the appeal process is very flexible, it's almost wide open. To the point, Jack, the Board of Review are able to introduce new evidence. Now, this complicates the issues a great deal when you can introduce new evidence at an appeal level. So sometimes it does take a long time, and sometimes it takes a long time to get the judgment and the written judgment. That could take some months.
It's too cumbersome. You've got to wipe out some of these levels of procedure, haven't you?
There's no question.
Mind you, you have been cutting costs greatly for many years now, certainly since '82, haven't you?
The costs have been...
assessments are down?
Assessments have been reduced over the last 3 years. But the number of claims have been decreasing 21% over the last 3 years, Jack. The number of claims have decreased by 21%.
Is that because of the depression?
Partly because of the depression. One fact that seems to stand out is when there is a depression, that the quality of safety on the job increases considerably, and probably because the people are more experienced.
Yeah, but I've got one statistic here that makes your compensation board look really bad. In 1982...
Well, those statistics you haven't got, they're not complete, Jack.
They're the right statistics.
They're not complete.
You allowed 85% of fatalities first paid. That's 176 dead in 82. 85%. In 85, you only allow 62%.
Now, Jack, just...
So that's down from 126.
Wait.
So you can see the thrust is to refuse fatalities.
Jack, please, be correct. Not yet adjudicated 18%.
Where? In 85?
In your 85. Not yet adjudicated 18%.
You're saying this is an incomplete figure?
That's correct.
This is only part of 85?
That's only part.
How many fatalities have you got reported there?
128.
I've got 126.
128. Disallowed 38, which is 19%. 1984 disallowed 23%, 83 18%,
so you're saying
21%.
You're saying that when that year is finished, that could come back up to 62 plus 8, which is 72, 80%.
In 1984, Jack, 13 are yet to be adjudicated. 1985, 36 are yet to be adjudicated. So the figures are very
These figures
similar.
Are incomplete, but you'd say they're about the same.
About the same.
About this, so is it not time you kind of changed the basic system? Especially on this business of referral to the board. Boards of review have been under criticism for God knows how many years. Why are they so slow?
Why is the system so slow?
Yeah, why are the boards of review so slow?
The boards of review as...
Is it because the members don't meet often enough, can't get together, delay it for 6 months?
No, I don't think so at all. I think it's the process and procedure more than anything. Under one section of the Act, it says that any decision made by an officer of the board affecting a worker may be appealed. Any decision may be appealed. And then there's a process as to how the appeal takes place. What we're trying to do is see that any new information which may be coming forward for consideration be reviewed by an adjudicator to see if that will modify the claim and change the claim, rather than waiting for that long period of time before it gets to a board of review or the board of review.
One more statistic. I don't like dealing with statistics, but I'm going to try this one again. In 1985, you disallowed, no, in 1981, about 5,000 claims were disallowed out of 200,000, a 2.4% disallowed rate. But in 85, the disallowed rate had gone up to 3.3%.
Could very well.
Does that not mean you're getting tougher on claims?
Well, Jack, in 1986, I guess it was, there were 160,000 claims. So you can see the claims are down in actual number as well. But it's very, very difficult to say what is the correct percentage of claims which should be disallowed, because you're dealing with different quality of claims, if you like.
Okay. Do you think there is need? And you've had a better chance to look than anybody else as a new figure in it, for another royal commission into the operation of the Workers' Compensation Board?
No, I've read the last two royal commissions, and they reached almost the same conclusion. And the problems they pointed out seem to be about the same as they are today. So I don't think another royal commission need be tendered for that purpose. I think the reference can be paid to the past royal commissions. The problems are basically the same. I think it's as much a matter of procedure as anything else.
Does the board set policy which says we are going to cut the number of allowable claims?
No.
None of that?
No, of course not.
Because all the cost is paid by the employers.
All the cost paid by the employers.
But they want the assessments to be as low as possible because they pay the cost.
Yes.
You don't feel there's any government policy which tells you, hey, go easy on compensation.
No.
Cut back the claims.
Jack, to start with, there could be a claim for a few $100s. To handle the appeal process could cost you maybe $1,000. So you're not cutting costs back by having these rejects take place. You're not saving money in the process. It's a very expensive process, a matter of review.
We need game for phone calls.
I don't mind, sure.
And I have some more questions after the break. Now, I was told years ago, and I faithfully repeat it on all occasions, that of the claims accepted by claims made to the Compensation Board, 95% or so are settled without any quibble or fuss. Is that correct?
Usually within about 3-week turnaround, Jack.
But that doesn't mean a final settlement. That's a first-time round medical aid only settlement.
Oh, no. That could be for time loss. It could be for many things. Remember, a lot of the compensation claims are relatively minor. A lot are relatively minor. Could be a couple of days off work. Could be relatively minor injury.
Right, but that 97% would still include cases where they've accepted the award, but the worker still feels that she needs or he needs a better pension, a better treatment, and will appeal it.
That could become an appeal, yes.
So it's a 97% first time round minor claims.
Yes, many of the appeals now before the Board of Review are not related to claims made this year, last year, maybe the year before.
One other question on the deaths, where I thought I had you cold on the deaths. The number 62% in 85 instead of 85% 82. You're right on these figures, are you? Because I was going to ask you, why don't you have an investigation of this special unit which adjudicates fatal claims to check the discrepancy in these statistics?
The disallowed rate, which is one rate you could use, Jack, in 82 was 21%, 83 was 18%, 84 was 23%, and 85 is 19%. Now, the not yet adjudicated, we go back to 82, 8% are yet to be adjudicated, 9% in 83, 7% 84, but 18% in 85, so they haven't been adjudicated as yet. Numbers are very similar.
Well, I've got a feeling there are a hell of a lot more complaints out there than there used to be a few years ago.
Well, there's a lot more people. There's a lot more people who have a far better understanding of the compensation system. There's the third-party advocates who are becoming specialists in compensation matters.
You mean lawyers?
Lawyers, yes, specializing in compensation. If you look at the Los Angeles newspapers and the classified ads now, you'll see that half of the first page are from lawyers advertising for clients with respect to compensation cases. So it's becoming a highly specialized area of law.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Jack, and good afternoon, Mr. Nielsen.
Yes.
My wife works in a old age care home in the Lower Mainland, and she's had a couple of claims with the W.C.B, which...
Well, get to the point.
I'm going to keep it short and to the point. A couple of years ago, she slipped and injured her back, and there's the problem.
Yes. Backs represent about 25% of the appeals.
Mm-hmm.
And
now, my question is, she has got this recurring problem.
Yes.
Now, should she reopen a claim or what?
Well, it depends on if the injury was determined to have been caused by work. Not just at work, but by the work. Was it caused by work? I don't know what age your wife may be, but I know people in my age bracket probably are suffering from deterioration of the back.
But can you get an opinion from either side of the fence from doctors? One will say it was caused by work, and the other will say, your doctor will say degeneration of the tissues due to age.
But Jack, then it can go to a medical review panel where the question of medical situation will be determined.
So
I don't know what kind of injury she may have had.
She goes for another appeal. Here's Kathy Walker.
She could go for appeal.
Kathy, go ahead.
Hi there, Jack. I've got one supplemental question, first of all, on the issue of fatals.
Yeah.
You know, on the question of in taking a look at the board's special unit, it seems to me that the statistics you brought out indicate that there are people who have been dead as long as 5 years, and their families are waiting for their claims to be adjudicated. Seems to me that that's good reason for looking at the board's special unit.
Well, there could be many reasons for that, whether it's whether they're being appealed or what circumstances.
Oh,
I don't
you said that they had not been adjudicated yet. That means that your board has not yet made a decision.
That could be quite right in some of those cases, yes.
And I think that those of us who are involved in the appeal system recognize that there are tremendous delays with the board's special unit and a very high rate of disallowal because, of course, what you're talking about in a fatal claim is a very high cost for the board. And it's been our experience with the board, certainly, that you have a very good likelihood of getting a disallowal or a referral to the commissioners when you have a very high claims cost.
When you have a very high claims cost, obviously it's going to receive more attention than a very low claims cost, of course.
But surely you ought to look at the statute to determine whether or not a claim should be accepted, not the dollar figure of the claim.
Oh, no, I said a high claim obviously will attract more attention, and so it'll be reviewed. Obviously someone's going to look at a very high claim.
I have a question with respect
even you
to the
probably would
structure
do
of the
that.
Workers' Compensation Board. One of the mandates that was given to you, Mr. Nielsen, by Mr. Lyle Hansen, the new Minister of Labor, was to take a look at a change to the structure of the Workers' Compensation Board. Business and Labor have been calling for quite some time for a board of directors structure to run the W.C.B. to reduce the vast powers that you hold and your predecessors have held. I wonder if you, Mr. Nielsen, would be prepared to serve as W.C.B. chairman under the direction of a board of directors composed of equal numbers of management and labor.
Well, that's one formula that's been suggested by some people. Quebec are following something similar to that.
That's
but
right.
But there's been a number of ideas sent from various people involved. Board of directors, a combination board of directors, advisory committees. The role of the commissioners has been suggested to be modified by a number of people. But there will be a suggestion put forward to Mr. Hansen with respect to that.
And what are you
as to
doing
what the structure should be.
Input from management and labor on that question.
We have received a great deal. We've received a great deal of input from interested parties.
Is it part of your franchise to go to Hansen with a suggestion if you come up with a restructuring of the board?
Yes, that's one of the objectives he's asked to.
And one of them might be a board of directors with a chairman, management and labor on the board. Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Quebec's experience has not been particularly good.
Yeah, it just seems that the three guys that you have now, three commissioners.
Yes,
You're
three active commissioners.
Yeah, and you're not the management and labor and a guy in the middle. They're all businessmen.
No. We have a representative from the engineers, the Allied. I should know the exact name of the union, or Bev Corman will
kill you.
Call me to task. But Bev Corman is representative of a union. Paul Devine is a commissioner. He was with the Board of Review before. I think Paul is generally regarded as very neutral.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello, Jack. I'm just in the process of conducting a 3-day advocacy training seminar funded by the federal government on WCB problems. And I just wondered if either you or Jim Nielsen were aware that there is a federal provincial task force clandestinely sitting now looking into a comprehensive disability system for injured workers across Canada. We have been informed at our seminar that it has been crashed by the insurance lobby of Canada, trying to shut it down, and we're interested in seeing what the reports are. This apparently is under Jake Epps' department. I just wondered if either of you knew anything about it.
Well, if it's a clandestine meeting, we shouldn't know, or otherwise it no longer would be clandestine. But no, I haven't heard of that.
But this is a federal government task force looking into some kind of universal disability system.
Yes, our organization, which has been in existence since 1979, have been fighting for this. We would hail this as a breakthrough for injured workers across Canada.
Oh, yeah, you're the Injured Workers...
United Injured and Disabled Workers Association of BC.
Yeah, no, we haven't had to think about it.
No,
But thanks for your call.
And we've just given it out to news medias.
Good, thank you. More with Jim Nielsen after the break. How long have you been in the job now, Jimmy?
About 2 months, month and a half.
Go ahead, please. How long is your contract?
At pleasure.
How much do you get paid?
Inadequate.
How much?
72,000 is the salary.
And then added to your parliamentary pension, you'll do fine.
I'm not receiving a parliamentary pension.
Not till you're 55.
No, I didn't say that. It's in the statute. Read the statute. It tells
55.
You. No.
60.
No.
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 How much?
Combination of service and age equals 60. Well, or 55.
You're over that.
Or 55.
Age and service. How much you get? I mean, we know what bad it gets. Why shouldn't you?
I don't know what the exact calculation will be.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Nielsen.
Yes.
I have a quick case here for you. I'll keep it as brief as possible. I fell off my truck at work one day. Now, I was able to work for approximately a week and a half after my injury until I sustained enough pain that I was unable to go back to work. Now, I made a claim to W.C.B., and presently my claim has been denied because of my witnesses not being able to pinpoint an exact date for your adjudicator as to the date of my accident.
Well.
Now here I am sitting at home with a wife and kid, and no money coming in, and unable to work. Now how fair can that be?
Well, I don't want to try and be difficult for you, but why is it difficult to determine when you fell off the truck? I mean...
Well, according to your adjudicator, Maureen Kane is her name, she has stated to me that because my witnesses cannot pinpoint an exact date as to when I told them I fell off my truck, because I work by myself, she said she cannot process my claim.
Well, they wouldn't be witnesses to the accident then.
Well, I told them.
I
told them when I came back from work that I had hurt myself that day falling off my truck.
So the date is not in dispute, I gather.
Yes, the date is very much in dispute. That's the whole case.
He's got no witnesses as to, even hearsay evidence as, he came to me on that day, the 10th or whatever, and said he'd fallen off his truck.
But that would identify the day. I don't know the case, but are they arguing that there is no evidence that it occurred on the job?
That's what she's saying. She's saying it did not occur on the job because she cannot pinpoint an exact date. My witnesses cannot say, well, it happened on the 29th. They can't say that.
Well, give my secretary a call tomorrow, please, and leave your name and number, and I'll phone you back.
Who would I ask for, please?
Just ask for the chairman secretary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Webster. I have a question for Mr. Nelson. I'd like to know, there's a lot of abuse on the Workers' Compensation Board, and I have a family relative working in the medical department, and he comes home exhausted every night, and they've got many, many cases all the time, and I feel that perhaps if they had a lot more doctors who they don't give enough credit to on the job, then perhaps the abuse would be seen through, and the doctors would be able to give enough information to the other adjudicators.
Okay.
I'm not sure what you mean by abuse.
Who's being abused? Do you mean?
Well, I believe that the people who come to the Workers' Compensation Board are abused, because
they
the doctors can't give...
Don't get good enough service.
Exactly. There's too much work, there's too much paperwork, as you were saying earlier, about the bureaucracy.
Yeah, no, but the doctors, most of the people who come to the Workers' Compensation Board for treatment receive physiotherapy or occupational therapy or some heavily specialized back therapy.
Yes, I understand that, but just I'm thinking, that there's so many people out there that...
Our doctors do not practice medicine as you would expect a doctor to practice medicine in a hospital.
That, yeah. I just wanted to say
the level of service to those people who undergo treatment at the board is second to none in the world.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you a question about the bureaucracy of the Compo Board.
Yeah.
I'm a patient down there, and it seems to me you've got a hell of a lot of staff there.
Yeah, there's about 1,200
related
staff
to
in
the
Richmond.
patients.
Well, yes, there is a lot of staff related to the patients, but you have to understand that in many instances, the therapy provided to an individual must be one-on-one and very intensive.
No, I'm not talking about the therapist. I'm talking about is the staff in the administration building.
Okay. We have about 1,000, and they're responsible for dealing with about 160,000 claims a year, plus whatever the backlog may be, and the appeal procedure from our end. So I don't know whether 1,000 staff would be too many for that, or right on, or not enough.
You haven't seen any sign of surplus staff yourself so far?
Well, Jack, if you look at the place, part of that staff, we have a laboratory that conducts about 35,000 tests a year. That's part of the staff. We have a record staff, we're microfilm staff. We have public relations information library, cafeteria staff. We have...
yeah, I know. As
So,
far as you know, it seems to be satisfactory and not overstaffed. Go ahead from this phone number. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Nielsen, Jack.
Yes.
I understand, maybe you could clarify for the public why the long wait on appeals, and also for myself. Question number one.
At the present time, there is a backlog in the system, about 3,000 to 3,500 claims.
We already know that, but
Yeah.
why?
Well, they have added up over the years. The Board of Review has not been able to reach a conclusion on these claims faster than the claims have been backing up.
I thought you changed the system on that and added more boards of review.
Yes, there's been an increase, a doubling of the boards of review. There's been a slight improvement in the numbers. The backlog is beginning to diminish somewhat. But the process and procedure, when you have a process and procedure that permits new information and new evidence to be gathered at an appeal level, then you're going to take a long time to reach a conclusion. It isn't the same as the usual appeal process where you're simply reviewing the information that the adjudication was made on. I think that's a flaw in the system.
Well, you're not convincing me, and I don't think you're the people that hurt.
Well,
But let that drop right
just a moment. It's very important. Workers' Compensation Board has no authority over the review board. It is a separate review board, managed differently and managed separately from the Workers' Compensation Board.
They can overturn it, though, can't they? The board can.
Only under certain aspects, 6 specific criteria, which amount to probably less than 100 cases a year.
Including the Testa case.
And true.
Yes, but when you consider
Cameron case.
The trouble is you can't, what was the other case you said, the Cameron case?
Cameron case, and I have about 15 or 20 more.
Oh, sure, but you have 15 or 20 more out of 160,000 in a year. That's precisely the point.
The point is that you can't settle a case quickly because of the continued injury of the worker and your assessment of him.
In some circumstances, that may be it, or not to the satisfaction. But Jack, look at our justice system in the country. You have cases go to the Supreme Court, which is your first level. About 35% are overturned at the appeal courts. But even then, as you know, we can still go to the Supreme Court of Canada under certain circumstances.
I'm telling you, this is going to keep you busy.
Oh, it's of course.
Your overall impressions are that it's not bad shape and don't need a Royal Commission.
Don't need a Royal Commission, no.
My thanks to Jim Nielsen, Chairman of the Workers' Compensation Board. I'll be back after the break. Got a full house tomorrow with Doug Frith, one of the Liberal experts on the Bissonnette scandals, Ian Waddell to complain about Vancouver Kingsbury being wiped out, and John Dixon of BC Civil Liberties Union in Blatherwick on the question of confidentiality and AIDS. Tomorrow night on Webster at 5 p.m. precisely.